Cullen live in 1 minute. Welcome to Lynn Cullen Live at pghcitypaper.com. Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com.
Hey there, and a good morning to you. It's March 12th, 2012. I say this in case somebody's come upon this in some future time. Who the heck knows, and is wondering what they've come upon. It's March 12th, 2012, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The first Monday after we've gone back onto daylight saving time. And I sort of like it because now, when I woke up this morning, the sun was just starting to come up, and I was treated to a beautiful sunrise. Which wouldn't have been the case if, in fact, we hadn't messed with the clock. So I happened to be awake on Sunday morning, yesterday morning, at 1:56 a.m. yesterday morning. And I thought, ooh, I've never seen what happens to a clock appended to, one of these, like your computer or or your television, that automatically resets on daylight saving time before and at the beginning and at the end. And I thought, this will be weird. What exactly does it do? I mean, how silly of me to wonder, but it's sort of like, I don't know if you ever like to watch your odometer change when you got a bunch of zeros lined up. But so I watched, and at 1:59, since daylight savings time starts at 2, at 1:59, I kept my eyes riveted to the digital display. And what do you think happens when daylight saving time clicks in? It goes from 1:59 to 3, just like that. Bango, an hour disappears. And I don't know why that struck me as just, wow, just like that. You can mandate that this day will only be 23 hours long. Wow. They programmed that right in, 1:59 to 3. Just like that. Oddly thrilling for me. I don't know. Doesn't take much. Okay. Looking at the newspaper today, front page, there's all kinds of stuff to talk about. Much of it not good, which is usually the case. I don't even know where to start. This horrific one-man massacre in Afghanistan is, to me, should be the beginning of the end. I mean, just if in fact, maybe we've already gotten to the beginning of the end, but we need to expedite this and get out of there. It ain't going to get any better. I don't know why we dig in and think there's something we can do. The people of Afghanistan want us out. Go. how many of our people are going to die as a result of the inevitable retaliation that will come about in the wake of this horrific massacre of mostly women, children, and old people sleeping in their beds. We got to get out. Seems to me. I mean, is there anyone other than the ones totally invested, which would be the military, who, want to be able to leave pointing to some positive, real thing that they have left behind, that so many of our young people have died to secure? I understand why they want to. Let me at it one more time. Let me keep trying. We can do this. We're close. I can understand that. I just don't understand how it benefits us to remain in denial about the inevitability of the failure of our effort there. It's already the longest war we have ever fought. Not that anybody's paying much attention. Afghanistan. Hey, did you watch Game Change, the HBO movie based on the book by Mark Halperin and I forget the other guy's name, about the choice of Sarah Palin as John McCain's running mate and well, what resulted. And God knows what resulted. We're still dealing with. Game Change is an HBO movie, and I did watch it. And the reason I thought about it just now is there is a scene in which some rather distraught members of John McCain's presidential campaign team are attempting to educate Sarah Palin on foreign policy issues so that she can stand a chance in the vice presidential debate, which she's going to have to endure, and also in any question and answer sessions, interviews with media people, a la Katie Couric. And the book and the movie make clear that she actually was unclear about the difference between Iraq and Afghanistan, was actually unsure which one we had invaded first and or why. She actually thought that Saddam Hussein attacked the United States on 9/11. She could not in any way give a definition of Al-Qaeda. Her lack of basic knowledge of how our government works, of current events, was, I don't know, what's the word? It was stunning. And no one, the people depicted in those scenes, all of whom are still alive, nobody other than Palin has suggested that these things did not happen. So Nicole Wallace, who was with the Bush White House, George W.'s White House, and who was charged with getting Palin up to speed on these issues, she has not angrily suggested that the movie got it wrong. No, it got it right. Nor has Steve Schmidt, who was McCain's chief of his campaign, who also was in on many of these sessions. He has not said in the wake of this movie that it was slanderous and historical fiction. No. This, in fact, is the reality that John McCain had as his running mate a person who would be, as we know, one beat away from the presidency of the United States herself, and one beat of the heart of an old man away. A woman who did not know 8th grade civics, who did not know My Weekly Reader current events. A woman of absolutely no intellectual curiosity at all. But a woman with an abundance of talent and charisma. Talent in the form of entertainment, of performance. So give her a speech to read, like her rousing speech when she accepted the nomination, like her speech at the Republican convention. Give her a speech. Give her a few talking points, and she will deliver. And that and Game Change makes that very clear as well. It's fascinating. But if you had asked Sarah Palin 4 years ago, as she was asked, so what got us into Iraq and what got us into Afghanistan and why are we there and how do you think we're going to continue on there? She couldn't have found either of those countries on a map. She might have been wandering around in Africa. As a matter of fact, I think she thought Africa was a country and not a continent. It is unbelievable. For that alone, the Republican Party should be exiled. 40 years wandering in the deserts. Of course, they already are there, but that's of their own volition. Oh, God. So there's a quote on the front page of the PG by a man who is the executive director of what's called Sustainable Pittsburgh, and this is a great organization that does good work and attempts to help neighborhoods remain vital and blah 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 blah. But anyway, there's a quote from the executive director that is highlighted under his picture. And this quote made me laugh. Now, I have been accused in my career of using big words. Why do you always use big words? Are you trying to, make me feel stupid? I had somebody write me a letter once like that. And I thought, geez, no, I'm just trying to use the right word for we have vocabularies, and then when you try to get a thought across, you look for the word that's going to put the thought across. And I suggested to this woman that if you didn't know a word that somebody used, wouldn't you, rather than think that they were using the word just to, ridicule you, why wouldn't you look it up and learn a word? But as somebody who does, I guess have a slightly better vocabulary than a lot of folks, and really not all that great myself, as you know, because every time Sokolowski's here, I don't know what he's talking about because he uses words I don't know. But this quote strikes me as so funny. I don't know why. Okay, here it is. Jess, you tell me if you think this is funny. It's not that it's not understandable. It's pockets of pernicious decline are ubiquitous throughout the region, and today's capacity crowd tells us just how pervasive it is. Do you think that's odd?
Yeah.
It's odd. Okay, so what's he was saying there was a large bunch of people who had gathered to find out what they could do about blight in their neighborhood. Okay, so pockets of pernicious decline are ubiquitous. That's just too much, isn't it? Pernicious decline? I mean, there's got to be a way to say that. Blight! People understand blight, right? Or, yeah. So that's what pockets of pernicious decline mean. And then are ubiquitous throughout the region. I mean, why wouldn't you say, I mean, we all know there's a lot of blight in our area. Rather than pockets of pernicious decline are ubiquitous throughout the region. That is just too blah. Okay, so never mind. And I'm sorry, it looks like a very nice man. I just want to say that that's just... Nobody talks like that, do they? I guess he does. Oh, well... Update on a story that was so unbelievable that I know we had trouble getting it into our heads that it had actually happened, but this is you'll recall the story of the woman who in attempting to give her mother the burial that her mother would have wanted, because her mother was such a strong Catholic, had made sure that, there was a mass and everything was in place. And then the woman had gone up to get communion at her mother's funeral mass and was denied it by the priest because he had ascertained that she was a lesbian. And the same priest then walked out of the mass when this daughter rose to say some words about her mother at her funeral. He walked. He walked and kept walking so that there was no one to finish the mass and nobody to bury her mother in a proper way. Just a little update I happened to catch in USA Today. A Catholic priest who denied communion to a lesbian at her mother's funeral has been placed on leave. I guess that's the best you're going to get. The Archdiocese has apologized to Barbara Johnson for the priest's actions. We pointed out that the diocese, that's the Washington, D.C. diocese, which is headed by Whirl, our former bishop. He's an archbishop now, isn't he? I think he's an archbishop. I don't think he's a cardinal yet, although he will be. And speaking of religious things, I saw that this was reprinted in today's Post-Gazette. Maybe some of you have seen it, but it is my obituary of the day. As so many of my obituaries are, you won't know the name. And I say that I don't think you'll know the name. Some of you might. William Hamilton. Jess doesn't know the name. I didn't know the name. I don't know from William Hamilton. Anyway, he warranted a pretty big obit. He died at the age of 87. He became infamous, which is not easy for a professor of church history at a little tiny divinity school in Minnesota to become. But he was minding his own business as a theology professor when Time magazine in 1966 printed an issue that created a huge furor. I recall it, being old enough to do so. And the Time magazine cover was very stark. It simply had 3 words on it, in addition, of course, to Time across the top. And the 3 words of the cover were simply this. It was a question. Is God dead? Well, in America, I'm sorry, a question like that's going to cause an uproar. And oh my God, did it ever. Now, he figured largely in the article. He didn't write the article. He figured largely in the article because he had written a scholarly book that nobody had read except for other theologians, in which he said that he believed that the concept of God had run its course in human history, that civilization now clearly operated on secular principles. And the churches now, he said, should be helping people to learn to care for one another unconditionally, without any illusion that they will be rewarded for their good neighborliness in the afterlife. In other words, he had decided that you didn't need the threat of hell or the promise of heaven to be a good person, or you shouldn't. And he saw secularism. Remember, he's writing this in the early 60s. He saw that as ascendant, and religion as perhaps having to adjust to it. Well, this poor guy, because some of his work was quoted in this article, became the immediate target of death threats. When he and his family went to their church the following Sunday, that would be the Third Presbyterian Church in Rochester, Minnesota, they were greeted with stony silence, icy stares. And so what happened to this poor guy, who simply had an idea that some people found, I guess, frightening, I'm going to suggest is the right word of reaction, really, frightening, ended up leaving his job. He was a tenured professor. He ended up leaving his job. He was essentially ostracized. He had to leave the town he had grown, he had lived his life in and raised his family in. That Time magazine cover story quoting him totally upended his existence. And his crime was he had a thought. He had a thought, and he wrote about it, and he wrestled with it as an academic is supposed to. And he wrote, scholarly works, and by so doing, sought out the reaction of other scholars to his radical idea, which was, where does God fit in this new world we find ourselves living in? And how do you reconcile the notion of an all-powerful God with an overwhelmingly secular culture? And this is something philosophers, this is what philosophers do. This is what theologians do. His crime was he did it. And in America, which has never been particularly, this is almost like, you look at what happened to Salman Rushdie. He too wrote something that put a death sentence on his head, that sent him into exile and hide. It's amazing how an idea can cause such an uproar. And until his death, this poor guy, William Hamilton, said that most people had absolutely misunderstood Because, of course, they never, read his scholarly article. No, they just got this guy says God is dead. He said, I'm not an atheist. I wasn't an atheist then. He said he always considered himself a follower of Christ, but, and again, understand, this is a very religious man, but he said whether Jesus was actually the Son of God or not, he said didn't really make any difference to him at all. What he found, the reason he followed Jesus, was because of his teachings. Right. He said, I don't need to believe the hocus pocus, virgin birth, this, that, the other thing, going to heaven, resurrection. This was a man who told us how to live. I will follow him. And he was saying that in this increasingly sort of secularized world, with us having a little bit more maybe, understanding, that, maybe we should start to acknowledge this kind of thing, that it's okay. He's no different there than Thomas Jefferson, than any deist would be. He said the death of God, it's like that's a metaphor. I mean, there was such an explosion of outrage when this happened. Loretta Lynn, how does she figure in this conversation? Loretta Lynn was so freaked at the very idea that God could be dead that she wrote a song going right after the very idea, and actually an entire album that says, the title of which was, Who Says God is Dead? And one of the songs on that album had these words in it. Who says God is dead? That's stupid and mighty low. I like to meet 'em face to face and tell 'em it's not so. There you go. Not exactly scholarly, rendering, but that was the. Anyway, this poor guy who's now dead said later in life that, and by the way, he went on to teach at other universities. He ended up at a non-traditional institution in Florida called the New College, and he said this a few years ago. The death of God, brouhaha, enabled me to understand the world. Looking back, he said, I wouldn't have gone in any other direction. I faced all my worries and questions about death long ago. So, anyway, William Hamilton III. God is dead. Okay. Beth says, loved Game Change. That's the HBO movie about Palin. The performances were brilliant, except for Ed Harris playing McCain. I agree with that. He didn't get him. He used both arms as though McCain had no lifelong. I agree. I mean, the one thing you would do if you were playing John McCain is definitely learn not to let that arm go up. And it was like a basic acting thing. And Ed Harris is a damn good actor, and it just didn't work. Beth also says, though, it made McCain a sympathetic figure and an honorable man. I would agree with that. And recall the movie, I'm thinking it ends with the concession when they lose the election. But I recall that concession speech that John McCain gave that night was the best speech I ever heard him give. And I remember thinking, good Lord, if this John McCain that I am seeing give this concession speech had been the John McCain that we saw on the stump throughout the election, he might not be giving a concession speech. He might be giving a victory speech. Because it was a wonderfully gracious, powerful speech. There was no rancor in it. There was nothing but love of country, and I think a knowledge in his head that he needed to tell his supporters to relax and to come to terms with the fact that they lost an election and that an honorable man had beaten them. Not a monster, not a Muslim, not a who knows what. Not that that worked at all for McCain. I don't know that he was able to do that, but I do recall that speech with, I was so grateful to him for making it. And in an era in which our politics don't show a lot of graciousness. And I really, 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 if you can ever, I'm sure you can go find it anywhere if you ever missed it. Best speech I ever heard him give. But if you have a chance to see Game Change, definitely do. Well done. Well done. And a recent history lesson that will, in some respects, scare the hell out of you. And it's an incredible look behind the scenes of such an extraordinary high-stakes game as who's going to be the next president of the United States. But it shows, in terms of the prep of Palin, it shows how somebody who is not up to the job, but who is well-schooled and has the right talking points down, can easily win. How you can take just about anybody. And I think the movie also makes us realize that the game has changed in that no one's going to get elected anymore that doesn't have the ability to be charismatic and have just sort of a natural celebrity aspect about them. So all these sort of stolid, strong, capable people who in the past might have considered running and be considered as a plausible candidate would not be probably a candidate because they ain't built for the kind of superficial, media-ized politics that we now have. The game has changed, indeed. And Palin and the excitement caused by her absolutely showed that we were in a new era, and it wasn't necessarily good. Quick break. We'll be back.
Email your questions and comments to Lynn at pghcitypaper.com or call Lynn at 412-316-3381. Lynn Cullen Live will return in a moment.
Pittsburgh City Paper's annual summer camp preview is available now. Pick up one today for A Streetcar Named Desire, The Blues Brothers Review, and Mo. Pittsburgh City Paper, available at over 1,700 locations throughout Western Pennsylvania and on the web at pghcitypaper.com.
This is the sound of a flat-screen television hurled off a building. Now the new bike your kid wants. These are the things you could have, all cast into oblivion. Because when you throw away money on wasted electricity, you throw away everything you could have bought with it. Use Energy Star light bulbs and appliances, and you could save hundreds of dollars a year. Saving energy saves you money. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Energy and the Ad Council.
You're listening to Lynn Cullen live at pghcitypaper.com. Once again, here's Lynn Cullen.
Yes, here I am. Well, speaking about lack of knowledge on the part of Sarah Palin in regard to just basic current events and or American history, there was an item in the Wall Street Journal today that I want to pass on to you. There's about to be the release by the national academies, the National Research Council and the national academies. They come out with what are drafts of what they say the standards should be for education in science. I mean, obviously there are groups that do it for all, but they're about to come out, I guess, in next month, in April. And gird yourselves, because, of course, when it comes to setting standards for science education in this country, we have entered a sort of dark period. You recall the Dark Ages? There are those in our country who would like to return, I think, to them because, again, they find reality unsettling, so they don't want it being taught. They still fight the battle over evolution, the teaching of. They still fight sex education. These stories are, they're constant. They're what we called in the journalism biz evergreens. They're just always there. But what the National Center for Science Education is going to say, of course, is that like evolution, climate change is settled science, which is saying that the vast majority, I mean, hands down, accept climate change, global warming, whatever you want to call it, as settled science. And consequently, as settled science, it should be taught in high school science classes. The executive director of the group says, we shouldn't be fighting the culture war in a high school classroom. But the hardest thing to be right now, I guess, is a science teacher. No matter what you do, some parent's going to come at you. So that a teacher in California who showed the documentary An Inconvenient Truth about climate change, all hell broke loose. Some parent filed a formal complaint against her, accusing her of brainwashing or attempting to brainwash the students. He demanded she be fired. He demanded she apologize, yada, yada, yada. And what ended up happening is the superintendent of that district said, okay. So in the future, if a science teacher is going to show an inconvenient truth, she has to inform parents beforehand, and they can opt in or out so that if they don't want their children subjected to this idea, again, this dangerous ideas that so scare some people, my God, that then they can, leave the class. Here's a mother in New York State who complained to the schools when she heard that when her daughter's science teacher was talking about climate change, he made a gagging motion, as you know, putting his finger down his throat as he was talking about climate change to show that he thought it was a bunch of garbage. So there's a teacher on one side and there's a teacher on another, and both, of course, end up in trouble. So these new science standards are going to be coming out soon. I just want you to be ready. South Dakota, the state legislature there has tried to get ahead of this, so they've already passed a resolution in South Dakota saying that climate change should be taught as theory, not fact. And a lot of districts are saying that children should be presented with both sides of the argument and be allowed to reach their own conclusions. But that kind of seemingly neutral approach is ludicrous because, as the director of the National Research Council says, I mean, an approach like that misleads students because there is settled scientific theory here. It's not like, I mean, you could do that. What? So now we're going to teach like evolution. We're going to say you can believe if you want that the dinosaurs were here when the Neanderthals were here. That's up to you. Or you can believe. I mean, that's not, you can't teach science like that. And he said, if that's where we're going to head, science education in this country, I won't even go into how in other countries they're getting real science and they're going to be cleaning the clocks of American kids when they all get into the global employment pool. If our kids are coming out with, coming out of school, having been told, well, you just think whatever you want. So anyway, the head of the Research Council says all students would be learning is not how science works, but about how politics work. That's what the lesson coming out of a lot of science classes will be. This is politics, not science. Can we do one more obit? And my second obit for the day is the following. You will not know this name. Or maybe you will. Again, James Trager. 86 years old, author of a gazillion books. He wrote these fantastic books in which he would do chronologies. He was a history teacher. This is history. He had a book well over 1,000 pages, which was called The People's Chronology, a year-by-year record of human events. And he would start with, the first potential human event. So he starts in a cave with a Neanderthal, and just keeps going. And by the time you get in one of his books, James Trager's books, to 1898. When I say 1898, do you know of something that happened in 1898? Jess, you don't? You should. 1898, what everybody knows is that the battleship Maine was blown up in Havana's harbor. You don't know that? You don't know that. Remember the Maine? Remember the Maine?
I don't know, Dave.
Remember William Randolph Hearst? No?
No.
But in Trager's book, so right next to the Maine getting blown up, start of the Spanish-American War, Jess. But that was also the year, so just that the Bayer Corporation offered a new cough medicine, which was called, get this, heroin. It was. Cough medicine called heroin. And don't think there wasn't heroin in it. There was. It was an opiate. Man, those were the days. You could just go over to your local pharmacist and get a bottle of heroin. And Coca-Cola had cocaine in it. This guy started as an advertising writer, but he turned into a guy who actually created encyclopedias. And great titles of his books. One title, this one came out in 1970, was The Enriched, Fortified, Concentrated, Country Fresh, Lip-Smacking, Finger-Licking, International Unexpurgated Food Book. So it was everything you'd want to know about food. And in that, you would find out that it was Genghis Khan who introduced sauerkraut to Europe. Who knows when you're going to need to know a fact like that? And then in 1972, his next book comes out, The Big, Fertile, Rumbling, Cast Iron, Growling, Aching, Unbuttoned Belly Book. And that was about nutrition. In that one, he dismissed the health advantages of organic food, by the way. Then there was his book on New York history. And in that, he starts with 1524. What would have happened in 1524 in New York? Well, huh?
The subway.
The subway? I don't think so. That would have been when Verrazano sailed into what was New York, or what would be New York Harbor. And that book went all the way to 2002, and so it started with Giovanni da Verrazano sailing into the harbor, and got all the way to 2002 with the closing of Ratner's Deli after 97 years of serving blintzes and latkes. Okay? But that, a lot of fun in his version of history. James Trager, dead at the age of 86. And one of the other things it says here, it said that 1902 was the year that the brassiere was introduced in America, which begs the question, what did women do with their boobs before 1902? If there was no brassiere, what did they use? Okay, so they didn't have brassieres. Corsets? Well, what would that do? The corset stopped under the breast, and by doing so just sort of shoved them up? Is that how that worked? But there was nothing in particular I don't know. I mean, you mean they didn't always have brassieres? That's sort of shocking. I think I got to take another break. I promise, no more obituaries today.
More is on the way with Lynn Cullen Live.
Go to bergbargains.com for great deals on tickets to the ballet, opera, City Theater, Science Center, Symphony, History Museum, and the Carnegie. bergbargains.com, Pittsburgh's only online deal site where the deals don't expire. bergbargains.com.
Sewickley Med Spa is Pittsburgh's newest med spa, offering the latest in skincare treatments and medical-grade skincare products. Their providers have years of experience with aesthetic treatments and technologies such as Botox, Restylance, Juvederm, chemical peels, Retin-A, and spider vein treatments. They offer a discreet, personalized environment with only the best quality proven services and products. Call them today for a free consultation. 412-259-8628. The Sewickley Med Spa. 412-259-8628.
Have a question or an opinion? Call Lynn Cullen at 412-316-3381 or email lynn@pghcitypaper.com. Now, more with Lynn Cullen Live.
Yes, that would be more with me. I was just looking at my hand is all full of cuts. You know why? Because yesterday I did what I suppose a lot of people did. I got out in my yard and did the kind of spring yard cleaning that normally I would be doing in April. I have never, well, I mean, I'm not telling you anything you guys don't know. I have never, by March 11th, had, my yard done. I mean, then I would usually move right into planting, stuff. I'm afraid to do that yet, but my God. So the news is we're going to have an abundance of bugs because of this warm winter. The winter is, I mean, I know we all enjoyed, I think most of us enjoyed the lack of cold and the lack of major snowfall. But I continue to be, and while I basked in the sun outside and actually pulled all my patio furniture out yesterday, I thought, my God, this is, there's something, I'm sorry, unsettling. Something really unsettling about it. That which you have, it's almost as if all of a sudden one day you wake up and the sun is rising in the west, It's everything you ever knew about what winter was has disappeared this year. And that's a little hard to take in. I mean, it really is. There is a piece on the front page of the Post-Gazette today, which is the kind of thing which makes me go crazy, and I don't feel up to doing a full-blown rant about it, but it speaks to the stupidity of, again, our state legislators. I suppose I could... We have a call. Hello?
Hey, this is Mary.
Mary, how you doing?
Good. I just wanted to say I can't accept this winter as fact. I'm sure we're going to get slammed.
You think we're going to get slammed?
I just can't accept that we got off this easy. Something's going on.
Well, I kept saying that too. I kept saying, be careful, it ain't over. I mean, we've had snow. I mean, it's possible. Even if we did get slammed, you can't. It'll have to melt relatively quickly or warm up quickly because, look, I mean, we're getting into what really is spring now.
I know. I haven't even used my snowies this winter.
No, I never took my snowies off its little hook this year.
And my little public service announcement, if you take your dog out in the woods now, ticks are really bad. Really bad, so check your dog.
What? Ticks.
Ticks, yes.
Oh, yeah. They said that's one of the bugs that are really going to be out there and hungry.
Yeah, I'm fighting them on my dog. So.
Oh, you are? Well, I still, if you look at the extended forecast for this week, for instance, it's full steam ahead into summer.
I know.
And then we're we're beyond mid-March then.
Yeah.
So what, I mean, I think we this is, but isn't it sort of unsettling?
It's very unsettling. It doesn't feel right.
No, it does not feel right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Thanks for the thing about the ticks, too. Yeah, I mean, I agree. So, right, we could have a blizzard next week. But so what? So what? It's over. It's essentially over. Okay, so back to the stupidity of legislators, a subject that is an endless one. I mean, so many potential. Every day brings you another slew of examples. But the one that greeted me today was about a new law, which I didn't know anything about, and you didn't either, called Act 24. And what that did was replace an old law, which apparently had been working just fine. The old law had to do with who could get jobs in school districts. And the old law had said that people applying for jobs in school districts in Pennsylvania had to undergo criminal background checks. Makes sense. And if, in fact, something turned up on that criminal background check, then they would be prohibited from becoming employed in this position for 5 years after their conviction for any offense, and after, I guess, probation, whatever. There was no problem with it. Till some we gotta get tough guys got into the legislature. I mean, of course, they're always there. And they came up with Act 24, which says there will be a lifetime ban on any person ever convicted of anything, apparently. You will never get a job in a school. And here's the part about the law that totally blew my mind. This new law says that applies to current employees. So in other words, if somebody was hired under the old law and has been working in a school, you got to fire him. Now, this brings up so many issues. First of all, I don't think that's constitutional. That's what I'm thinking. I don't think you can do that. But of course, Corbett's Department of Education is saying, oh, yes, you can. Oh, yeah. Not a chance, I don't think. But here's the reality of idiotic laws like that never give a person a chance. When somebody makes a mistake, and maybe even a big one in their lives at a young age, and then pays their debt to society and emerges back into society, do you want to make it so hard for them that you punish them for the rest of their lives by preventing them from getting gainful employment, preventing them from becoming an exemplary citizen? You just keep hammering at them and denying them this. You deny them the right to vote. You deny them jobs. You deny them government programs. Deny them education. Deny them scholarships. So what are you going to do? A person gets out of jail, does their time, does their thing, and you put every impediment possible in front of them so that there's no way they're ever going to be able to live a good life, and I mean a life in which they're contributing to the society. The punitive meanness behind laws like this and the short-sightedness of laws like this blow my mind. They are stupid. It's like letting somebody out of jail and telling him, but we will not let you make a living. So I guess you'll have to, rob banks. I don't know. Because you're not going to be able to make a living. We will not let you be a regular person ever again because you did that. But I did my time, and I did the probation, and I did this, and it doesn't matter. I bet all these guys who voted for this are, consider themselves Christians, too. I thought Christ was all about forgiveness, huh? They don't forgive. They don't forgive, and they don't forget, and they believe in punishing somebody until you pummel them into the ground. The reason this blew me away. There aren't that many people to whom this even applies, but Eleanor Shute, who wrote the piece in the PG today, focuses on one guy, Arthur Johnson, lives on the north side. This new bill will cost him a job he has had for 11 years. Yeah, he did time. I'll tell you what he did. He was hired at the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, even though the people who hired him knew he had been convicted of voluntary manslaughter 18 years earlier. Okay? He served his time in jail, 5 years. He served 5 years probation. And then, okay, so you've got 18 years ago he does the deed. And then he does 5 years of jail time, 5 years of... And they give him a job driving a van. He moved up. He not only was such an exemplary employee that he then became a facilitator for the fatherhood program that the Allegheny Intermediate Unit has, in which he has counseled hundreds of young men on being a good father. This is a guy who went from the wrong side, paid his debt, and now is doing good work, exemplary work, and this bill they passed throws him out of work. He's been helping to change other young people's lives, and the people who employ him have nothing but good things to say about him. So anyway, just so as you know, the Pennsylvania State Education Association has filed a lawsuit on his behalf and on behalf of 5 other employees in other places in Pennsylvania, also who have records, also who have proved to be exemplary employees, and who were hired under the old law. You can't make a new law and grandfather it. Apply it. I mean, that's the opposite of grandfathering, isn't it? It's like all of a sudden you're guilty. It's mind-blowing. It's punitive nastiness. Mean-spirited. Jesus wouldn't agree with Act 24, whether he was the Son of God or not. God. Okay, that's it. Thanks very much for being with me and spending any of this time with me. I appreciate it. And also, what? Tomorrow, my sister. Wednesday, Potter. Thursday, Sokolowski. And Friday, we even have a guest. Ha, 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 ha! I will not be alone again this week. Okay. Toodaloo.
Lynn Cullen Live, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. and archived at pghcitypaper.com. The opinions expressed on Lynn Cullen Live are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the viewpoints of Pittsburgh City Paper, Steel City Media, and its advertisers.